Ladies and gents, welcome to the Realtop show. I have a very special guest here today, someone I call my brother from another mother. I have here David Taylor. David Taylor is one of the partners of Taylor Foley in Charleston, South Carolina, and also the principal, if I'm using the right title, of David Taylor Law, also in South Carolina. And he's not only a business colleague of mine and someone I've known for a few years, but he's also someone that I think is very special. In his entrepreneurial journey, I've gotten a glimpse into it, but I thought it would be appropriate to bring him into the show and take you guys through it, because I think it's an interesting journey. And we're going to talk about the importance of our spirituality, of God in Jesus, and something that, a lot of people don't want to talk about this stuff in business, but I think it's important. So guys, David, welcome to the show, man. Thank you for being here.
Thanks, Nick. I always love the chance to talk to you. So this is special for me.
Man, truly, we've had some cool conversations, and I'll tell you guys, I've met David face to face once. Okay. Well, one time I got a chance to spend a few days in Charleston and had a blast with David. He and I had these great conversations, and I felt like I made a friend forever. And I feel like he's somebody that more people need to know about and more people need to connect with. And that's the purpose. So thank you for being a great friend, David, first of all.
Oh, man, that's easy. That's easy, Nick. Thank you. And now that you say that out loud, that we've only met in person once, that kind of shocked me because I feel like I've known you forever. But you're right. We've only been around each other in person one time. We've talked for so many hours, but that's incredible to hear.
Yeah. It's cool. Kindred spirits, you could say.
Definitely.
Now, David, I wanted to go through your entrepreneurial journey. Okay. You're an entrepreneur, you're an attorney. Okay. That's your skill set, but you're truly an entrepreneur. So I wanted to go back and just talk about, what you're all about and where you come from. Where are you from?
I'm from a little textile mill town in South Carolina, the upstate of South Carolina. Whenever I say I'm from the upstate, everyone says, "Oh, you're from New York," but there's an upstate in South Carolina as well. Very small town, about 2,000 people. My father was born there. He met my mother while he was in the Air Force in Washington, the state of Washington, in the middle of nowhere, brought her to South Carolina. She was probably more of a South Carolinian than anybody I know. And she ended up being the mayor of our little town, actually, for a while.
Really?
So I had very, very special parents in there.
Your mother was the mayor of the town you grew up in.
Yeah, she was like the fourth mayor the town's ever had in its 100-year history.
Stop it. How long was she the mayor?
One term.
One term.
So my father, growing up in the town, sort of thought he was the mayor because my mom was the mayor. So he was, my dad had a great father and mother, unbelievably good parents. But my father especially had a personality, right? So she did it for the right reasons. She wanted to just serve that little town that she loved so much. That little town is Lyman, South Carolina. And she did it for one term, and that was it for her. The three mayors that the town had before her had all served, I think, 35 years or more. So she served one term, and she said, "That's it for me." So
how old were you when she was the mayor?
College. Yeah. So
wow.
It was after I was out of the house. So yeah.
Did that come with any perks, having your mom be the mayor of the town you grew up in?
Perks and drawbacks.
Perks.
Yeah. So my life was a little bit different back then from an activity standpoint. I was a young college kid. So it certainly helped me keep out of trouble at times. But then the towns next door, there was sort of a rivalry with all the little small towns. So you shouldn't speed through those neighboring towns when you have the last name of the mayor of the rival town. So
no shoot. So what was it like? What was it like growing up there? Did everybody watch each other's back in a town of 2,000? Was it a really tight community? What was it? What was the vibe like?
Yeah, everybody knows everybody for sure. The vibe was typical South Carolina small town, especially in the upstate, and that generation, which was the 70s, 80s, and then I went to college in the 90s, right? So it was a small town. In retrospect, it was a great place to grow up. It's still a great place to be. My brother and his family still live there, in my parents' house. Actually, they They renovated my parents' house and moved in there. So, and that speaks. My older brother is 10 years older than me, is the best man I know on earth. And he and I weren't always close, to be honest with you, with the age gap. And we were both, I would say we were both kind of lost for a long time, sort of a Taylor family tradition to, be a little wild for a while. And then around 40 or so, wake up. My dad did it. My brother did. And so did I. But my brother is one of the more amazing people that I know on this planet, and has a service heart for sure. But he and his wife decided to move into my parents' house. And for a long time, let me put it to you this way, Nick, they keep my parents' traditions. My mom always decorated for Halloween and Christmas. My brother and his wife continue to do that. My brother and I intentionally, we talk about this out loud. We feel like we have our parents. I mean, I think about my mom and dad every day, and they impact me. I usually cry about this time. They impact me to this day. They impact people that I talk to because I talk about them and my brother talks about them. We're doing it now. He's the first one that said it. He wanted to continue their tradition as if they're not gone, because we don't really.
What are some of those traditions? What are a few of those traditions, David? Christmas traditions. You mentioned Halloween.
Decorating the house in my mom's spectacularly flamboyant way. Very unique lady. One of her family members at her funeral service said something that I'll never forget. Her name was Verna May, by the way. Remember, she wasn't born in the South. She was born on the West Coast. How they got Verna May, I have no idea. But our family member described her as the only lady that she'd ever seen that could make a t-shirt and jeans classy. So wow. My mom just had a cool vibe to her. And what made my mom so cool is she wasn't trying to be cool. She was just being herself. It took me a long time and a lot of heartache, Nick, to just realize that if I'm just myself, that's good enough. Like I don't really have to worry about me. I'm fine like I am, right? My mom had that inherently. So, but some of the other traditions, I mean, they helped everybody. Didn't talk about it. They just did the right thing. My brother says, do the next right thing. My mom and dad never said that. He says that, and I say that because of him. They just did it. Did it. My brothers continued that tradition. Just a good way to live life. I had great parents. That's really what it boils down to.
You had great parents. Did you grow up in a house where, your mom was obviously a mayor? I mean, you got to have ambition for that. I mean, that's coming from somewhere. But, what about your dad? What did your dad stay busy with?
My father was very rowdy as a young man, as a very young man. He actually got kicked out of high school in the 9th grade for punching the principal.
Oh, no.
And my grandmother, who was one of the more devout Christian ladies I've ever known, was so fed up with him that she helped him join the Air Force at 14. Now, you couldn't join the Air Force at 14, so you can figure out how that all worked out. But he went into the Air Force to really straighten his act up. Met my mom. Still had quite a rowdy streak to him for a while, as I mentioned earlier. But he came out of the Air Force. He was working 3 jobs at one point, and he was driving, or they had a Volkswagen Rabbit. You remember that model?
Yeah.
And he would take the car into the Volkswagen. Back then it was Volkswagen Mazda, to this new car dealership, and he just befriended the service manager, a guy named Dewey Nichols. And one day, Dewey introduced him to the owner of the company, the car dealership, Harold Gombert, a German immigrant. And my dad didn't realize that at the time, but it was basically a job interview. My dad thought he was just hanging out with this guy and talking with him. They offered my dad a job. My dad quit his 3 jobs and started selling cars for this German immigrant new car dealer. Started out in the used car department, quickly became the used car manager, was moved over to the new car department, quickly became that manager, became the general manager, wanted to be back in the used car side. He just, sort of, when ducks find water, they swim, he found his water. And he was in the car business for 45, 50 years until he passed away.
That's phenomenal. One of the guys that, actually, if you listen to the intro for the podcast, the guy that inspired me to call this company Realtop, it was a guy by the name of Joe Girard. And he was, I don't know if you ever heard that name, but for you listeners that haven't especially, He's got a great book. So Joe Girard was, or still is, the Guinness Book of World Records greatest salesman of all time. And he sold something like 6 cars a day on average for a 16-year career span at Chevy in Detroit, like in the 60s or 70s or something like that. And he wrote this little book. It's the first page is, he literally says, like, this is not a motivational book. I'm not Tony Robbins, let me just take you through what I did throughout the day and how I made a lot of money and how I took care of nice people. And that guy inspired me to call this company, Realtop. Like, who's really at the top? Who's the number one verified by the Guinness Book of World Records? And I always love the story of the car salesman, because I feel like that's an entrepreneur that you're within an organization. You're this like ultimate intrapreneur. You got this entrepreneurial fire, but you just don't know how to express it. And you're like, hey, car dealership, I'll do it here on someone else's dime. And I just love car salesmen because of that guy.
I can spot them a mile away. Growing up around the business, I can be out in public at a Walmart or whatever, and I'll look over at somebody and I'll say, that guy's a car dealer. They just stand out to me.
Very
special. Like this, Nick. So my father, unfortunately, had dementia, which is ultimately what took him from this world. And while he was in the later stage of his dementia, he would sell cars every day. He would go to work every day.
Stop.
The guy I mentioned, not in reality, in his head. So the guy I mentioned earlier, Dewey Nichols, went to see my father, and my brother asked Dewey, how'd it go? And he said, it went great. He sold me a car. And my brothers, they laughed a little bit. And my point is, my dad just never stopped working, even when he was, mentally not with it anymore. My brother said, well, they laughed, and he said, well, how much do you sell the car to you for? And Dewey said, $34. So one of the things about dementia, which is a terrible disease, but when my dad first started suffering from that, it was a little scary. I thought it would be, more often than not, it was hilarious.
It was hilarious.
That's the way my mother and father were. They were hardworking people, very kind and giving people. They also didn't take themselves or life too seriously either. They had a good time, had a really good time.
What do you think is, I love your dad's generation. It's somewhere around my grandfather's generation. What do you think's up with them? They were like these great people. They were all about honor. They didn't have to talk about working hard. There were no quotes on their wall about doing the right thing. They didn't need like a meme to inspire them. There was nothing motivational back then. There was nobody motivational except for your local priest. Yeah. And what do you think was up with that generation? Why were they so, hardworking and they just seemed like they had more honor? I know for my grandfather worked 100 hours a week. He told us, I worked 100 hours a week. I came to America, and his whole thing was he never looked for balance. He always looked for more hours. Like, where can I get more hours? I'm like, what? Don't you have a hobby? What do you think's up with that generation?
I have a perspective on that, Nick, that might surprise you or might be different than you think. I think that human beings, I think our species have pretty much been the same throughout history. And, I think it's easy to look back at prior generations and think of them with, nostalgic eyes and memories and think of them as the culture is different. And it probably is different. But I think my mom and dad's generation, your grandfather, they had their lazy section and their hardworking section. And I think our generation, we have hardworking people probably listening to this podcast right now. And then you have the lazy side. I think human beings have been human beings for a long time. People talk about how bad it is in this world right now. Can't argue with that. Then I read biblical accounts of Rome. We're not that bad. So
we're not that bad.
And I also hear people that I respect a lot, lifetime ministry type people say, we've got to do something. We've got to change. We've got to, we're losing this battle and all that. I actually have a little bit more optimism than that. Christ and our scripture says that we win. So I already know, it's sort of like Tony Evans said this one time in one of his sermons, who I love Tony Evans. He makes me laugh. And teaches me as well. But he talked about some concept, some theological concept. And he said, it's like the Dallas Cowboys, he's a Dallas guy. The Dallas Cowboys won the game, but you didn't see it. But you DVR'd it. So when you go home later, you're going to watch the game. You're still going to be excited and then worried and all that, but you actually know the end. It's the way I feel about what God's going to do and has done for us. So I look at the generation that my parents were and all that. I think we still have those same people. I know a lot of them. I know so many impressive and I don't know what's the word I want to use here, Nick. So many people that I admire in this world right now that makes me ashamed at myself at times. You know what I mean? It makes me want to do better. I mentioned my brother's one of them. So, I went through some personal struggles 10 years, 11 years ago, and I had people come out of the woodwork, one of which is a mutual friend of ours who introduced you and I. And I don't know what I would do without those people. Those are great people. So I think we have people like my parents, your grandfather's generation. I think that we have plenty of those right now.
We have plenty of that. I love your optimism, and I got to tell you, as I grew up in a pretty cynical environment. We're kind of, I've said this in some of the other interviews, but we're kind of salty here in Boston. I don't know what it is. Maybe it's the snow or the stress or the cost of living or the lack of vitamin D. I don't know what the heck it is. The foliage just isn't cutting it. We just seem to be a little extra salty, not to generalize everybody, but just, I'm a happy-go-lucky guy, and I still come off as a little salty too. But, being a little extra cynical sometimes, or growing up in that, every once in a while you discover like a movement or a group of people that just do the right thing and just surprise you. About 6 or 7 years ago, I signed up to run a marathon, and a friend of mine got me into it, and I had to raise a bunch of money for a charity. I didn't even realize I had to. I don't even know what the charity was. And I remember asking people to donate money. And I remember people coming out of nowhere and just making these donations. And then along with the donations, they would send me these instant messages, and they would tell me why they were donating and what this charity meant for them and what their family's been through. And I remember for that period, it was probably about like 6 to 8 months that I was raising the money. Like my cynical ways, where I just thought everyone was up to something, and my Boston way of doing things just like melted away. And I was like, man, there are some people in this world that are just gold, and they're not advertising it. You just don't know. They're like underground doing great stuff constantly, and they don't put it out there. I wish they would. David, I want to talk a little bit about your path. It's pretty cool. You've had this wonderful upbringing in a small town, and your parents just seem like the most amazing people. And your mom is super inspiring, becoming a mayor. Your dad is old school, ambitious car salesman, like that he's that guy. He's that guy, that I love. And how did you get to where you are now? Like, what's that journey? I'm curious now.
Yeah. It turns out I was the first person in my family, pretty much my extended family, to graduate from college. But growing up, it was never really a question of whether I would go to college or not. So I don't really know where that expectation or that culture came from. One of the things I wanted to do was get out of that little small town. But it was interesting to me to realize that at some point in life, like, no one else in our family has college in their background. That was probably a generational thing, certainly maybe a Southern generational thing. And then I've got I think 5 degrees now. So I'll be honest with you, Nick, I worked my way through college, like not the traditional way. My girlfriend Kendra, she worked her way through college, and like a lot of my friends, while she was going to school. I was a little bit smarter. I took co-op jobs. So I work for IBM for 4 months, and I would go back to college for 4 months, and I would go back and forth and all that. which is a great way to, by the way, pay for school. But when it came time to graduate undergrad, all my friends were like, I can't wait to get out of college and go to work. And I was like, guys, like, you got after Christmas, you go back to work the next day. Like, you don't have a month off. I mean, school's kind of cool. I loved it. So when I took the long plan in college, had a great time. And
Where did you go to school?
Clemson University.
Where's Clemson?
Everybody asks that.
Yeah, where is that?
Clemson is in South Carolina as well, up in the upstate of South Carolina. Gorgeous, gorgeous little town. Foothills, mountain, lakes, unbelievable. And most people know it because of the football team now, but it's a special place.
So you did your undergraduate there, and was there a period between that and law school that you went to work and you took some time off? You've got these 5 degrees. How did that transition?
Yeah, I didn't take any time off at all. I went straight to law school. In fact, law school was never on my radar at all. When I finished up at Clemson, IBM, who I co-op with, offered me a job, and I did not want to be in a large firm, a large organization. Talk about being cynical. I realized that big corporate world wasn't me. I just want more. I want more out of life than some of that organizational stuff can give you. And a friend of mine, a really good friend of mine, he wanted to go to law school, so he talked about it all the time. And one day we were just hanging out, and he was talking about law school, and I said, "How long's that? How long does that take?" And he said, 3 years. And I went, "That sounds pretty cool. I'd like to stay in college for 3 more years." So I started looking around and applying and got into law school. As a matter of fact, a friend of mine, a fraternity brother of mine from Clemson, and I were going to go to Europe, and we were going to go to like Greece or whatever, show up on an airplane with no plans and just work for a year and hang around. I don't know, build houses or something. I don't know. I had to let him know that I was going to law school instead. He ended up just fine, by the way. He's been out in Vail, Colorado, developing property and all that. He's a great guy. But so I went to law school, and I didn't really like law school, and nothing in law school really interests me except for one area, which was taxation.
Why? Why taxation?
All of law, except for I think taxation, is an argument between a spectrum of ends, right? Like there's this side versus this side, and you argue in the middle. Okay, that's not a right answer. I'm a math guy. I like a right answer. I like the most efficient thing, right?
Okay.
So as a tax lawyer, I put business deals together, right? If the tax in a transaction is $1 million and I can get it to $50,000, that's what I want to do. I don't want to get it to 700,000. I want to get it to as low as you know what I mean?
And it's clear. So this is the first part. It wasn't working with a particular type of client or the relationships. This is your I don't know if it's analytical, but your mind working in this manner wanted to focus on something like this. Did you know right away that you wanted to focus on this type of law? Like, how did you find that?
Yeah, I had a tax class in law school, and it was the only class that I enjoyed in the entire history, my time in law school.
Really?
So it became pretty obvious, and then there's a degree after law school if you want to practice in the tax world. It's a LLM. It's Latin for something that I can't pronounce, but it's essentially a master's of law. And there are various. You can get a master's of law in different areas like environmental law and I think patent law and things like that. Taxation is one of them. So I went to tax school, LLM program, and really enjoyed that. To be honest with you, I'll be honest with you. I didn't really apply myself scholastically. In undergrad and really in law school either, except for the very end. Did okay. I mean, I did better than okay, but when I got to tax school, which was, really 1 year, I decided, hey, I'm going to try. Let's see how good I can do, So I tried. I gave it like a nice, 88% and did really well and enjoyed it, honestly. When you study something or when you work in an area that you love, it makes it not work. Warren Buffett, who I really, really, really like to learn from, he says he skips to work every day. I think he's pushing 90 now. He's been doing it for a while. It's not really work, If you really enjoy it that much and you don't have to do it, I would think we could all say Warren Buffett doesn't have to do it. yet he does it every day. It's what he enjoys. People ask me all the time what my hobbies are, and it always stumps me because I don't play golf. I don't hunt. I'm not a good Southern boy, right? Like, probably in order, right? I love being a dad. I'm not married. That's my number one thing in life is being a dad. I love to travel a lot. I think my parents instilled that in me. And God has given me a lot of opportunities to see a lot of special things, and I don't take that for granted. I like working. I like doing what we do.
That's incredible. I a lot of times I'll tell my wife I wish I had some hobbies. Like I've got a lot of miserable friends and a lot of miserable jobs, and they have awesome hobbies. My hobby, like you, is work. I enjoy it. So I don't think that's uncommon for a lot of entrepreneurs. Like they go with it's not just dollars and cents. Because if you really were to measure, if you were to try to make sense of the entrepreneurial journey, you probably wouldn't do it. It doesn't make sense. Like you could go get a job, go get your 401k, have some compounding interest for your retirement, um, get your salary, you live a balanced life, take your vacations. And on paper, it usually makes a lot more sense than starting a business or going in, So maybe not enough people are talking about that. Maybe you do need to chase your passions a little bit more or focus on doing something for 10 hours a day that you love. How much of your joy comes from doing something you love or something you enjoy throughout the day, those 8, 10, 20 hours that you're working a day, whatever it is, and versus you doing it for God. There's another thing. I've known some people with some pretty crappy jobs. I mean, on the surface, they just no one would want to do. I remember my grandfather had tough jobs. He was a sponge diver. He dove in cold waters in northern Africa, and it was a tough job. He was a pretty happy guy. Like he worked hard, but he was doing it with honor and he was doing it for God, right? How much of your joy is coming from just enjoying what you do as if you would enjoy a hobby versus just knowing that it's a good thing, you're helping people and you're doing the best work you can for the Lord because you have this gift?
Great question. I think I look at what we do on this earth and the time we have here, whether it's what we're doing for work, out and about, seeing someone struggling, encountering anyone or any opportunity, or just being alone and looking at the Colorado Rocky Mountains and which makes me feel like close to God. I think you can have an opportunity to honor God and to be what you were created to be, which is a selfless, caring, and service-oriented creature in all contexts. Now, that's not to say that I do that well or often enough. I certainly want to, and I love it. I'm most happy when I'm in that lane which God created us to be. So, an example of this is, one of the best parts about my law practice is I get to meet these wonderful people, and most of these people have become so close to me. They're like family. I have a couple of my clients that consider me like their fourth son, and also their friend and their buddy. I've got some great stories, Nick, but the overwhelming thing that I did not expect when I got into the legal practice was how awesome my relationships are with our clients. I also get an opportunity because I'm talking to them. I don't just talk about the tax code and their business transactions and all that. I talk to them about their life, and I'm able to share with them, what I consider to be, and I call it truth with a capital T, God's truth. And I also call it reality. Like, it's not the other reality or the supernatural, whatever. That's reality. What we have here is kind of like sub that, right? But I was with a client last night, actually, who's going through a divorce, and just being able to talk about that and talk about God in that context, that's a platform that I wouldn't have if I weren't the attorney. And I'm not a divorce attorney. We were talking about something else, but so I'm able to. All of us as human beings go through trying times. Okay, we go through good times, we go through trying times. I'm able to have a seat at the table with someone who's going through a trying time and help them. Does that make sense?
Makes a lot of sense. And it seems you have this rapport with people, and it seems you have something, the missing link in business right now, and all business seems to be trust. There isn't enough trust, and you have pre-installed trust with your clients. And that's something that just can't be replicated on a website, or, we've talked about ad campaigns. You can't just create that out of the blue. You have these wonderful relationships, David. And just to create a little context around your client relationships, do you think you could tell the audience a little bit about your business, your multiple businesses, but your main business day to day? What is your practice all about?
Sure. Historically, and I think it's bordering on 25 years now, had an unexpected route into the legal world, especially the tax practice, the transactional tax practice. When you say tax attorney, I've learned over the years, nobody knows what that is. And it's even hard for me to just, yeah, I mean, everybody always says, well, can you do my taxes? And I'm like, you don't want me doing your taxes. I don't do my own taxes. We put business deals together, and we try to provide efficiency in the deal to narrow or reduce friction. There's always closing costs, commissions, attorney's fees, deed stamps, whatever. There's all these, when you do a business deal, there's all these transactional costs that are involved in the transaction, and we try to minimize that. The most substantial one is usually the taxation. So again, if I'm able to take a $14 million tax bill down to $1 million for a client in a transaction, that increases the yield. That's pretty cool. But back to my entry into it, I came to Charleston, South Carolina to work for a firm because I just love the people. That firm dissolved. And because I'm a lawyer, Nick, I get to say this: lawyers and doctors are the worst business people that they just are. We are, right? We're doers, we're professionals, we're craftsmen. We don't have that. God didn't give most of us that talent. And so this law firm, which was just full of just all these wonderful people, they split up. And so a year and a quarter after I got out of tax school, I was on my own, and I turned down a few jobs. I started my own practice. It's the best thing I ever did. So I had that entrepreneurial spirit that my mom and dad both had, by the way, just naturally, but I also had the opportunity. And so I had different iterations of that practice. I had some partnerships here and there over the years, and I was mostly in real estate. I love real estate. My mom and dad of that little town I grew up in, it's a good story. I won't tangent too much, but these are small, 900 square foot house, right?
Okay.
It was 4 rooms, not 4 bedrooms. It was 4 rooms.
900 square feet. That's a big house. My mom's house was, I think, like 500 square feet. It's like a mansion.
Yeah. We had 1 bathroom and a cast iron tub. I didn't take a shower until I was a senior in high school.
Holy smokes.
I'll never take another bath again, by the way. But we had a relative moving from Washington, and there was a house down the street that was in foreclosure. So mom and dad bought it under the theory that my mom's sister, when she moved, would live there and buy it from them, and it was a good deal. Her sister and her husband didn't like South Carolina, although now my aunt lives there in Lyman. She's great, but they moved back. So my mom and dad had this house that they had to do something with, and they rented it. And that, if you knew my dad, that set him off on a Monopoly game. So I think they owned like 1/3 of the town by the time they passed away. Little houses. So I grew up, guess what one of my jobs was as a kid. So I grew up taking care of those houses with my dad, and free slave labor here. But I loved real estate. So I got into real estate quite a bit, still love real estate. 2008, 2009 was not a fun time. But I still had that tax law practice and these great clients. And so after that.
Would you say, by the way, just kind of picking apart your brain, I'm curious now. You go to law school, you didn't seem to really like law, but you like the numbers. You like the numbers, and real estate has a component of that. It's one thing to buy a real estate piece of real estate fix it up, make it pretty. It's another thing to do a calculation in your mind with ROI and, net operating income and, moving equity from one property to the other and scaling that quickly. It takes a certain mind to do that. Would you say that love of real estate was kind of a love of math, and you probably got a lot of from your dad?
Definitely. Yeah. As a matter of fact, I'm not good at many things in real estate. Managing a construction project or contractors and scheduling and all of the chaos involved in that process is not a skill set that I have. That became very obvious. Putting together the deal, financing it, seeing something nobody else sees in real estate, especially commercial real estate, it's all about cash flow, value. Residential property is relative value. It's what the house next door is worth, pretty much. With commercial real estate, you can buy something and change the income, the net operating income, the cash flow out of it, and your valuation goes up. So seeing something that nobody else, creating something from nothing, is right up my alley. So that's what I love about real estate to this day.
You love adding that value.
What's that?
You're creating value when you do that. I mean, you're literally creating an asset. You're creating equity from a value add.
Yeah, it's fun. It's not. There's a similarity with the tax practice, the tax law practice. I get paid to do puzzles all day long. I get paid to solve puzzles, to figure out a way to handle the situation creatively through numbers. And if you ask me to write a paper, something to read for like fiction and fun, terrible. If you ask me to create in that world of business or economics, I could do that. That's not work.
So your tools are all these different tax laws, and you take those tools and put them to work. David, can you talk about, you and I had this conversation once, and I found it super intriguing. We were talking about, buying and selling companies. And I think on the surface, a lot of people, if you're listening to this podcast, chances are you're an entrepreneur, you own a business, right? And you're thinking, one day I'm going to get the revenue up and the EBITDA up on my business to XYZ. And I'm going to sell it for the market says I can get a multiple of, 5 times EBITDA on this business, 30 times, 2 times, whatever the case is. That's market. And that's going to be my exit. And one time you and I had this conversation, I remember it was like, because I just assumed you sell a company, you get a big fat check and walk away. And when you broke down for me the importance of preparing yourself before the sale of a company, and not that this was the topic of our show, but can you talk about that for a brief second? Because I don't think enough people are talking about it early enough, especially.
So you mean preparing for the exit, having that as a strategic goal?
Yeah, absolutely.
Sure,
the tax implications.
And again, when you're around a lot of smart people, I'm blessed to have so many great people in my life, especially my business life. And a lot of them, you learn from by watching, people that are special and they think differently. And so I've seen the people that have grown these organizations and increased cash flow and then exited. They had that as a plan from day one, from very early on. I have one client who I just love to death. It was a restaurant chain, started from scratch, built, 56 locations or something like that. They tried to take that brand to market, did not like the numbers, kicked back for 4 years, only 4 years, kicked back for 4 years, aligned management, gave management, part of the rising tide opportunity. And I think they increased the value like 4 times in 4 years. So by the time after they sharpened their pencil and went to work, right? Hardworking people. By the time they went back to the market after that 4 years, it was the difference in value, the increase in value was remarkable. Think about a 4 times increase in EBITDA and then put a multiple on that.
Holy smokes.
Yeah.
Is there, when companies are going to market and they can take a business like that and bring the profitability up, does the EBITDA multiplier go up as well? When someone's seeing that a business is running far more efficiently, the managers are incentivized better to take more control, are buyers likely to pay a higher premium for something like that?
Yes and no. So to drill down on that answer a little bit, your industry and your specific sector is going to put a collar around the multiples that are being offered. Now those move with interest rates, but usually this is professional capital coming in to acquire your company. It's either a roll-up organization or PE group, private equity group. So there's going to be a market range for those multiples. But then if you are prepared, your books are clean, your organization is running, efficiently and perfectly, you're going to be on the top end of that multiple range. So I've been amazed at the clients we've been around. This is not any attribute to us whatsoever. We're blessed with good clients. But I've been amazed at the transactions we've been involved with. Our clients always get the top end of that multiple. That's usually why they decide to sell. And these people they seem so blessed, and they seem to have, the golden horseshoe in their pocket or whatever. Really, they're just hardworking people that prepare and do it the right way. Without exception, I've had a few clients, very, very few, Nick. Most of them I parted ways with that were not good people. The overwhelming majority of the people we represent are really good people. They do things the right way. They take care of their employees. Their priorities are in order. Hardworking is such a foregone conclusion to be at that level. Everybody's that, but these people have something else. And in the businesses that I've formed and developed and am forming and developing right now, it took me a while to figure that out, right? Like St. Augustine calls it disordered loves, but I figured out a few years ago, there's a priority in life. And if you have things out of order in that priority, you're going to have some trouble. So the classic example is if you put your work before your family. Well, that's inverted. Family should be above work. And if you have that out of order, wherever you have it out of order, it's going to fail eventually. So if you put your work before your family, eventually you're not going to have either one of them. If you put your work before your health, eventually you're not going to have either one of them. The people that we've represented have everything in order for the most part, including their financials and their operations. And so when we go to sell these companies at market, the transactions are really easy. In the due diligence period, the companies are happy to pay the top end of those multiples.
That's interesting. It's interesting you talk about how your clients typically are these hardworking people. They don't sound like lucky people, by the way. They don't sound like there was a lottery ticket and they hit it big, coming up with some great business idea. They sound like they're just hardworking people. Do you think there's it seems a lot of people will look at somebody that's had some success and they'll almost look at them like they hit the lottery, like, hey, that guy, he hit it big on this stock, or not necessarily stock, but he hit it big on this business. He was in the right place at the right time. And they're only seeing the wins versus the blood, sweat, and tears that went into creating these businesses and how they took care of people and their systems and their financials and their priorities, which you mentioned. You think too many of us in our society are just looking at the wins and forgetting about those core principles, and that a lot of these successful people, they have those things in line and they're not inverted?
Yep. It's one of the, I guess, the secrets of being successful in business is, I can sum it up. This is my own personal comment and view, but it sums nicely into what you're asking. Had this conversation with my son recently. I don't play the lottery. Now, I tongue in cheek say this, but I actually believe it. Like, the lottery is voluntary taxation, and what good tax lawyer would voluntarily pay more taxes, right?
Okay, well, I never thought of it like that. That's a good point.
Yeah, that's the joke that I say. But the reality of it is, and I believe this, while everybody's going and buying lottery tickets, I'm just going to spend that time working. I'm better off for it, not just economically, hopefully one day, but I learn, right? Like, when you put in the blood, sweat, and tears, even when you take the losses, you learn. When you go through bad times or hard times in life, personally, relationally, maritally, financially, health, right? Trying times, you always figure something out. There's a gift in every trial, right? So while everybody else is buying lottery tickets, I'm just going to use that time to work a little bit more. And I tell my son, I'm going to win the lottery. I'm just going to do it over 25, 30 years. And
I'd be happy doing that.
I guarantee you that I'll win the lottery. it's just not going to be in one stroke of a scratch. It's going to be over a long period of time putting in the work, which, by the way, the blessing is not to sell the company for a 6.5 multiple. The blessing is all the things that you do on the journey to get there, all the people that you meet, all the people that you're able to take care of or have a role in taking care of as your employees and your vendors and your co-counsel and opposing counsel. Most importantly, your clients.
That's wonderful. The relationships you build, like looking back at previous jobs and those that camaraderie you have coming up, starting from nothing. You can't replace those days. You can't put that on a spreadsheet. I don't think people realize that. That's not something you can clearly calculate in a formula. And I bet a lot of these people, and this is my guess because I haven't been part of it, but I bet a lot of these owners that end up making their exit, obviously you're probably happy to get a check at some point, and I get that, but I wonder if it can be a little sad too if you have to step away from something you built and maybe leave those relationships. Have you ever experienced that, like in your own businesses or talking with clients, where they kind of miss the old days, starting up?
No, and I'll tell you why. I don't think I've ever thought about it. I've never been asked the question, but the reality of it is none of them stop. Just because they exit one particular venture, they don't stop. My dad never stopped working, even when he couldn't work. I meant to tell you this earlier. My brother, we were laughing about my father one time, which we did when he was alive too. He said, he never worried about money. He was just going to make more money. I mean, my dad, it was never like money was never a problem. I'll just make some more. Like, what am I going to do tomorrow? He didn't play golf either. He didn't really have any hobbies either. His hobby was working. So again, the people that I've seen, I've been lucky enough to be around and watch them transition out of something that they grew. They don't really have a heartache about seeing the organization go. They did what they needed to do to have that organization and the people in it, be taken care of. But they went on to do basically the same thing, maybe with a different brand.
That's phenomenal. David, tell me a little bit about what you're staying busy with today.
Yeah. Well, so a few years ago, I'm a transactional tax lawyer, and I've got family in the marketing and television business, as you know, Nick. We also do securities work, which is compiling private money together, ventures, groups of owners doing ventures. But I've ventured into a new area of law, personal injury, which I, had no experience with whatsoever. But you've seen the typical lawyers on television that are advertising. And since I had some familiarity and some contacts in that market, I started a personal injury firm. Never really wanted it to be branded with my name, but that came about, and that's more of a burden than it is anything else. But but it gave me an opportunity to start a new firm, a new business in an area that I've been historically involved in, which is law, but in a completely different way. So in my tax practice, I've represented fewer clients and really well-off clients, right? This industry, our clients are just like my mom and dad and the people I grew up with, right? They're just normal. There are more of them. And even getting into the personal injury side, it's got such a reputation to it. At first I was like, how am I going to do this? Like, how am I going to see people that are saying they're hurt and they're not? And, how am I morally and ethically going to deal with that? That's not what happens. What you have are people that are hurt. I've been in situations personally where I was kind of like alone and lost and scared. I wasn't physically injured. I was emotionally and spiritually injured for sure, but mostly from my own doings. But I was like alone, and I had people come from nowhere. My best friends to this day, our mutual friend that we talked about earlier, and they walked with me through some trying times. So when I started this new firm, the personal injury firm, we're, as I mentioned earlier, one of the things that's foundational about our firm is we have a very intentional and stated and express priority. We help people, period. That's what we do. And, I have this policy in our firm. If somebody calls us and they need help, even if it's not an injury or something, we get these calls a lot. It's not really anything that we can help them with as a law firm, right? But the people that answer these calls and talk to our potential clients and our callers, they're empowered, they're instructed, they're charged with spending as much time as they can or should on the phone with anybody. Because if you're taking the time to call us, you need help. And just because we can't make any money off of it because you don't have an actionable case is irrelevant. So we spend time talking with clients because they need help.
I love that.
It's sort of like marriage, Nick, right? Like God intended marriage to make you a less selfish person. Most people, including me, thought of marriage as supposed to make you happy. Well, if you go into marriage expecting it to make you happy, you're not going to have a successful marriage. Whereas if you go into marriage or you're in marriage and you realize that it's meant to make you less selfish, you're supposed to serve this other person. And I don't know about everybody, but I know I'm hard to get along with. So for, whoever's married to me has a tall task of putting up with me, right? But if you serve the other person and become less selfish, you actually end up happy. That's the way God made us, right? We're supposed to be caring, loving, less selfish, or not selfish creatures. Same thing with business, I think. If you do things in a priority that's the right way, the things that are lower on the priority list, like profitability, they come. The money follows doing the right thing. And if you have that inverted and out of order, it fails.
I've been, for the listeners, I've been super blessed to have been part of this journey with David on this new venture. And one thing that I've really enjoyed, I'm gonna comment on this is, seeing that this business, a lot of people start a business because they need to make a paycheck. Okay. And you already have a successful business. So you definitely didn't need to start this personal injury firm. And I think it's amazing because, being in these marketing meetings with you and some of the other team members, it's always been around the client. It's always been around caring for them. It's always been around making deposits, making constant deposits, goodwill, deposits. And eventually, you can make withdrawals. They're coming, and there's success out of that, and there's goodwill, and there's trust. Money will come. There are trillions of dollars out there, ladies and gents. You don't have to chase dollars. Create trust, give love. And you've taken this approach, and this is why I wanted you on the show, but you've taken this approach with this law firm that I've never seen, by the way. I'm from Boston. Everyone I know is an attorney. I mean, everybody. There's no other profession here. We don't even have waiter. Even the waiters are attorneys here. Like everyone's an attorney in Boston. And I've never heard this type of approach to caring and to genuinely wanting to help people and just not being transactional. Business has become so transactional. You pay XYZ dollars in marketing to acquire a client for, $200, and those $200 translate to $500 in revenue minus operating expenses. And we have a net profit, and businesses are run like that, and they freaking fail every single time. They're run by spreadsheet. And again, you got to have your financials in order. There's no question. You got to keep the lights on. No doubt about it. But you got to remember, and I'll let you elaborate on this, but you have to go further than just the transaction. And I think it's special. Can you talk to us a little bit about the kind of like, the mission, the vision, the values of David Taylor Law, of this new venture, and how you've sort of allowed it, it's kind of marbleized in everyone and everything at the firm right now. Everyone's on board, man. It's badass. Like everyone seems to be on board, and it's really inspiring. But how are you getting that out there with everyone? Like, are you just hiring really good people? Are you training them? How does it happen?
Very well. Any organization is just a sum of the people involved. So in all of my organizations, my tax practice, I've had the same staff for years, just their family. And we talk about our organizations as family. Some people say team members and all that. It's family. It really is. And Nick, I mentioned earlier, truth with a capital T, God's truth. 6 times 7 is always 42. The laws of God, because he made all this stuff, they're just as constant as that, right? And truth with a capital T, God's truth is attractive, right? So to the extent that this dumb guy right here from this little, small upstate South Carolina town gets anything right, which is also just by God's grace. I mean, I was a tough case. God had a lot of work to do to get my attention, right? But one of my other hobbies is learning about God, right? So when you instill that in a business organization, it's attractive. It makes everybody want to be there. I want to be there. It makes our clients want to be there. It all works. Yeah. And, I get to tell my little boy, like, now I say, what does your dad do? You know what daddy does for a living? Daddy helps people. Okay. Not just, I'm using me as an example. The people that work in our organization, they get to say, I go to work every day and help people. Nick, I think I shared this story with you. I love this story. In one of our ads, it's just me talking like I am now. And I use a comment, and it's not what I said, but I was talking about being alone, and we walk with our clients through their dark days and their tough times, and when you feel alone, we're going to walk with you, whatever. We had a little old lady that lives in a nursing home call our law firm, and she said to one of the people that answered the phone, she goes, I'm not hurt, but he said if you're alone to call, so I'm just calling because I'm alone. I'm lonely. And the young lady who answered the call knew, because we talk about it all the time, she can spend as much time with that lady as she wanted. So she's talked to her for like 45 minutes to an hour. She calls her to check on her now. That makes people want to come to work. In law, and I'll pick on lawyers again, one of the reasons why I didn't want to go with a large law firm or be in a big organization is because, you need 2,000 billable hours. You have this many hours to bill this week. And there are these objective criteria that has all the focus on the income and none on what I'm talking about. And we're not like that. We never will be. I don't want to be in that organization. I don't want to live that life. I don't want anybody that I love to live that life. So one of the greatest things about being able to start this firm from scratch is to instill that culture. We help people. And again, everything else will work itself out.
David, at what point in your life did you bring, it seems you had a shuffle in your priorities at some point, and correct me if I'm wrong, but it seems at some point you put God towards or at the top, or maybe just in every single category along with everything else in your life, from family, relationships, business, whatever it's going to be. But when did that happen for you? And it seems that whenever that happened, you have this great empathy for these people that you're helping right now, right? You have this great empathy. And did that sort of get sparked from when you made that priority, or when
Definitely.
you made God your priority? When did that happen for you?
Yeah, and this is super personal, and I'm very happy and excited to actually share this, but it's super personal. So, I grew up in this little town. My parents we went to church. They talked about God. By the way, my mom and dad got divorced. Nick, I know you and I have talked about this. Yeah. My mom and dad got divorced when I was in high school, and then got remarried. And in a town that size, you can imagine, the rumors and all that, but they got remarried. And when they died at both of their services, which were a few months apart, by the way, the number one thing that was discussed was the word covenant over and over again. So they were pretty special people, but my mom especially talked about God. They loved God. But honestly, I'm a very logical, linear thinker, the math guy. And if I were real, I was not honest as a kid, but if I were honest with you, I would have told you that I didn't believe in God. I got saved as a 12-year-old. That was still the most real experience of my life ever.
What was that experience?
But it wasn't like it. I couldn't logically. It didn't make any sense. And I would go to church when I was married before. I would go to church and I would listen. And I'm very cocky. I think of myself as a smart guy, right? So I'm listening to this preacher talk about things, and I'm like, I have no idea what he's talking about. And if I don't know what he's talking about, all these people around me can't know what he's talking about because I'm smart, right? And so this whole thing is just like, tradition or something. I don't know.
What kind of charade is going on here?
I guess, and I never said that out loud. I would even try to talk to my friends about being, saved and all that. But ultimately, what happened, Nick, is because of my, God gives you up to your own appetites. Romans 1 says, God tries to get your attention, and at some point he goes, all right, have it your way. Thy will be done, not mine, right? And that'll make you sick. Numbers 11, it talks about the Israelis, wanting meat, and then God gave them all this quail falling out of the skies until it was coming out of their nose, right? God gave me, I have this thing that I like to say is, I got everything I went after, unfortunately.
Got it.
And I was miserable. So I blew my life apart. I blew my relationship apart, my marriage. I was pretty bad. I don't know why anybody wanted to hang out with me, but then I got real bad. It was coming out of my nose, right? God gave me up completely. And it was so miserable that I gave up. And, I lost my family, lost my marriage. And all these people came out of nowhere, right, to help me. I was broken. And at one point, this one guy who's a little bit younger than me that, lives up your way now. He was a strapping young man. We had a lot in common. We were just good friends. We had a lot of the vices that we had in common as well. And he just talked to me. He was talking to me and he was asking me questions. And I said, I just have to admit, like, I don't believe in God. Like, I've never said that before. Wow. And one of the first Bible verses that I ever learned really was Matthew 11:25. It says, thank you, Father, for hiding this thing from the wise and the learned, doctors and lawyers, right? The wise people that wise in their own eyes, and to revealing it unto babes or to little children. In other words, you need to have like a child's attitude of being mesmerized by things, right? You need to be open. And he quoted that verse to me, and he just basically said, just open your heart a little bit. And I did. And since then, that logical, linear thinker of me, like, one of the problems with people that are atheists is that C.S. Lewis says they're intellectually lazy. Now, C.S. Lewis was an atheist, right? And became one of probably the foremost Christian author ever. And I love his logic and his thinking. He's right.
It's easy. Atheism is easy. Yeah, I mean, it is.
But it's you're not thinking it through, right? Paul says everybody knows there's a God. Even people that don't believe in God, they know there's a God. You let something bad enough happen in their life, they pray. What is that? We instinctively in us know there's something else. I mean, I tell my little boy, you're not nothing. You know that you're not just going to disappear. You know that there's something more. You're not temporary. No human being has ever really thought that. Yet some of us live our lives like that and think like that, because logically, it's a hard story to believe. The Christian story is a hard story to believe. You mean a person, God came down and became a person? It's a hard story to believe. But if I laid down my cockiness, I laid down my, I think I know. And as soon as I admitted, like, I might not know, as soon as I laid that down, it just came pouring into my life like a fire hydrant. And so one of the things I love to do is learn about God. It's so obvious to me now, certain aspects of that. It lights my heart on fire. To learn the reality of God, it just lights my heart on fire.
That's phenomenal. How old were you, or how long ago did the floodgates open for you?
I'm 50 years old. As I said, if your last name is Taylor, you have to blow your life apart around 40. So that was 2011. 2011 was a year I'll never forget. So 10 years ago.
Now
and I'm not perfect, Nick. You know that, but I mean, I'm not at all perfect. I can only be perfect when I'm in Christ. That's it, right? And so I'm just happy to be, I'm just happy to be on the team.
I love it. And I really wanted you on today because, we tend to lose our priorities as business people. It can be very transactional and all about the bucks and buying the next shiny toy. And I've done it myself. And you and I have shared this. We bought some shiny things we probably didn't need in our lives, right? And you get that out of your system pretty quickly.
Yeah.
But now you've taken this journey and you're applying it to business as well. And the way you're approaching speaking to these people and helping people out, I just really enjoy it. And I just want to give you and the rest of the company just so many props, because I think what you guys are doing is just beautiful. And the way you're approaching it is beautiful. So, thank you for your service. And I'm having a blast here chatting with you. Do you have a little bit more time, or are you in a time crunch?
No, we can do anything that you want.
Oh man, tell me about the future. Obviously we can't predict tomorrow, but you're doing all types of cool. Every time I talk to you, you've got something going on. Like what are you up to? What's in store?
Yeah, so God has an interesting way of, letting you walk through this world, right? So we were introduced to another lawyer who is in the advertising space last year. And it was supposed to be sort of a mentor relationship, and we immediately liked each other. And he suggested that we partner up. So right now we're putting together a partnership of our two firms with the expectation of taking our brand to multiple markets a lot quicker than I expected.
That's phenomenal.
And as again, I get to pick on my practice, my profession. Doctors and lawyers, right? Lawyers aren't the best business people. So to me, there's never been really private institutional money backing these kind of legal practices. That's happened a little bit in medicine over the last 7 years. Private equity going into medicine, and there's some regulatory issues that you have to deal with there. They don't want business people giving medical advice. They don't want business people giving legal advice. That needs to be to the craftsman, to the professional. But there's a whole nother area of medicine, right? With insurance reimbursements and HIPAA and all that. It has nothing to do with medical advice. It has to do with running a business. So there's been professional management and professional capital that have come in to the medical practice. No one's done that in law. And so my vision over the last several months has been to do that in law. I think we'll be the first firm to do that. But that's the goal for the next, say, 5 years.
Are you going to be able to, how do you think you're going to be able to take these values right now that you've put into David Taylor law right now? How do you expect to franchise that out? It's one thing to, I wouldn't say franchise, not a franchise, but it's one thing to grow an organization financially and operationally, but putting the soul into it, how are you going to do that? How do you do that? Do we know?
I jokingly say that my role is CCO, Chief Culture Officer.
I love it.
When the other lawyer and I started talking about it, he's been in the business for a while, and he's creative. He's a maestro at messaging. He's awesome. He said, "Look, what I want out of this, we're equal partners and all that, but we want to be. I want control over the creative, the marketing, which is fine with me. He's better at the creative than I am." And I said, "Okay, I want control over the culture." He said, "Fine. It's going to be a challenge, but this particular lawyer was he visited Chick-fil-A headquarters in Atlanta and was blown away by their processes. He was always impressed by their service. They're just different. They're best in class at a lot of things, right? And he brought that dream, that heartbeat back to his own firm. This was before we met him. And so, he loves their culture. He loves the fact that anybody at Chick-fil-A can do there's just a lot of things that are unique for Chick-fil-A that you don't find in really any other organization. But ironically, for your question, it is a great example of, is it Kathy Truitt? Kathy, the founder of Chick-fil-A, man of faith. It's closed on Sunday. How much money does that cost Chick-fil-A to be closed on Sunday? Priorities. So he believed in his faith that you should have a day off, the Sabbath. And so, he didn't compromise on that. So there are things, and by the way, Nick, this is attractive. This isn't something that should be a hard sell. There are places, when I worked for IBM, they had a reputation of being like the best place to work. Google and other organizations like that at times have been like, they're the best places to work. Usually that kind of falls off when you get sized. I want that from my family. I want that for the people that are around me that have honored me with the ability to be part of their organization.
Chick-fil-A is an interesting case study, I'd say. Not too far from my house, there's a Chick-fil-A and there's a McDonald's directly next door. And half the time you can't get into the Chick-fil-A. It's a madhouse, like 24/7. It's not 24/7, 24/6. It's a madhouse constantly. And, so the kids are screaming in the car and you're like, all right, forget it. I'm just going to go to McDonald's, right? And you head next door and you just see the difference in attitudes. At the end of the day, it's a similar job. You're pouring soda, putting a sandwich in a bag. Like on the surface, it's a similar job, but the vibe in that place is totally different. You talked about inverting values. If you invert them, you kind of destroy both things. And it's interesting. You look at the idea of prioritizing. You mess up your priorities. So a lot of companies don't prioritize their employees over the customers, right? And they prioritize profit over the employees. And God and having some time off isn't prioritized anywhere. And you see all these weird inversions and the whole thing sort of falls apart. They're an interesting case study. I don't know how someone could actually go into that organization, figure out why everyone's so damn cheery and document it on Excel. I don't think they can do it.
Yeah.
You talk about these truths. If you could figure out how to document that and roll it out to multiple organizations, if you can bottle that, oh man, that'd be something special.
Well, I think you have to have an awakening to Christ and God, and I don't know any other way to do that, right? Like some things are just counterintuitive until you see it from that prism. I'm not to say that we as Christians have this exclusivity and all that. I'm just saying that when you are aligned to the reality of how you were built as a human, things go a lot better. And if your car's out of alignment, it gets shaky. The more out of alignment it gets, back in 2011, my car was really shaky. Like it got miserably shaky. And then you get back into alignment when you get your car aligned or you get your priorities and life aligned with God's truth. We call it peace, right? Things are smooth. And so I don't know any other way to bottle it, Nick. And when we're talking about taking God's truth and applying it to business, I can't apply it to business without that truth. So I think, the first thing I would tell somebody is, are you lost? I mean, are you happy? Are things going well for you? I don't know. And until you have that awakening of how your maker designed you and wants you to be, I don't know if there's any book or spreadsheet or anything else that's really going to help.
What about, if you were speaking to an entrepreneur and if you're a business person right now and you're feeling a little lost, and David, you could put yourself in their shoes, and I'm sure I could as well. What are a few things that you could say to the entrepreneur, just somebody that's lost right now, that's listening to this, like some things, practical things they can do right now to get out of whatever darkness they're in today? If we can actually end on that note, what are a few things?
Probably find somebody that has gone through what you've gone through or experienced what you've experienced, and somebody that can walk with you to show you what you can't see. One of the things, I'll use a metaphor here, but it applies, right? That's one thing I love about God is this whole natural world is full of metaphors that reflect that reality. I could tell you a million of them. So when you're standing up next to a piece of art or a painting or even a map or something like that, you're standing real close to it. You really can't see it. You can see it, but you're way close to it. But if you back up, you can actually see everything about it. If you're too close to something, meaning you're a little lost, find somebody that's backed up and that can actually see it from afar to help you and guide you and back you up a little bit and let you see the full scope of everything. That'd be one piece of advice.
That's phenomenal.
Call it a mentor, I guess, but a brother.
A brother.
To walk with you.
David, I want to thank you for this message. I want to thank you for, giving us your time today. You're a super busy guy. If a caller, or excuse me, if a listener wants to get in touch with you, and they want to reach out to you, whether it's, they're selling their company, or they maybe need a mentor, or there's something of value that you can provide. Because I know this is who you are as a human, putting aside the business stuff for a second. How can someone reach out to you?
I would love an opportunity to meet any human being on earth for any reason. So I can give you my phone number, email address, website, whatever. I'll tell you what I tell my clients and everybody else. If you need anything, call me. Like, I'm happy to spend time with you. The best part of living on this earth is being able to spend time with other human beings. It's what we're made for. You and I have done that together. That's why I still can't believe we've only met in person one time. I feel like I've known you forever. It's because we spend time together, real time together. We don't have to be in front of one another. I mean, I know so many things about you. I know we have a similar background with our parents' situations and things like that. I know we both experience our parents and their health issues. I know so much about you because of our fellowship with you. So I would love the opportunity to meet anybody that would like to call me.
A side note, by the way, your father and my father both got kicked out of school in the same year. So you mentioned that earlier. I just wanted to throw that out there.
Well, I didn't know that, but we've shared so many similar stories about our family. I mean, one of my favorite stories you told me was the third drive-through, right? I use that to this day, Nick. I love it. Yeah. I love it.
We're having a blast. David, thanks for being on the show today, man. Love you, brother. And I hope you can come on again ASAP, because you provide so much value. Have an amazing day.
I'll do anything for you, Nick. Anytime.
Thanks, brother.